Today's notes will be about annelids. Annelids belong to the phylum Annelida, which means little ring. And as we can see here, one of the common annelids is the earthworm and has all these little rings. If you look at the shininess here, you can see all these teeny little rings that make up the annelid. Annelids have specialized organ systems. So what we're going to see is that we're getting more complex in the setup of the organism's body. This doesn't mean necessarily that genetically there's more complexity or anything like that, but body system and setup wise, we do see more complexity. They're going to have a closed circulatory system like the octopus and squid, meaning their blood is going to flow through blood vessels, and then they are bilaterally symmetrical and do have a true coelom. One unique characteristic of annelids is that they have segmentation. This is different from other worm species like the platyhelminth and nematode groups because they have segmentation of their whole entire body, which gives them more movement and flexibility. What we see is that a lot of the annelids are going to be more land and water based as opposed to parasitic like we saw in the platyhelminths and nematodes, and this is in a large part because of this segmentation. The nervous system of annelids is more developed than we've seen in any of the other organisms, aside from the octopus and squid. They have what we consider a cerebral ganglia. Cerebral, you should think cerebellum, which is in the brain. And this is the true primitive brain. I know we talked about cephalization kind of being like that first brain, and while that was the beginning and development of the head region and those cluster of nerve cells, this is truly starting to develop into its own organ, which would become eventually the brain in other phyla. And you can see that here in the worm. They are going to reproduce sexually. And even though we're not going to talk about it a lot, we're going to fill it in on our chart that they are, because they have a true coelom, they have two openings and it's going to move in one direction. So here we have the mouth, the anus would be on the other end, and they have that gut, so they have intestines where their food is going to move through. There are three groups of annelids that we're going to talk about. The first is the class Polychaeta or polychaetes. These are marine worms, and as you can see, they have bright color, which is very characteristic of marine-based creatures. So they're most likely going to be living in corals and areas like that where they'll blend in. But they are marine-based, so they're going to live in the ocean and are going to be free-swimming predators. The classic worm that we think of is this next group, which is the oligochaete. And when we think of worm, often a lot of people, especially from the Midwest, this is their default. They're going to think of this. They are living in the ground, and this is characteristic of their ability to decompose. They're going to be very beneficial in our environment as decomposers. If you find them in compost piles and things like that, they're going to help to break down that organic matter and return it to a more fine soil. Now, this is very beneficial in most areas, but they also are going to consume things like roots, depending on where they are. They can be pretty invasive, and this is the case in, I believe it's the northwest region of the United States, that earthworms are actually a problem because they're taking out root systems of trees and causing a lot of problems. The word chaeta, that suffix here, chaeta, means bristles, like stiff bristles, and that's like the limb system that we've seen on some of these. They're just kind of short hair-like things that are going to help them move. And the word oligo means rare or few, and so we can see that we don't really have those bristles on the earthworm like we saw on the marine worm. So oligochaete means just few, or rare, meaning they don't really have any. The last group of annelids we're going to look at are the leeches, and leeches are a fascinating creature. They have the segmentation just like the others, and we can kind of see that here with the ridges of their body. Now, leeches are going to be freshwater based. They're found in lakes and streams and things like that, and they will suck your blood as a meal, and they will continue to feed off of the host until they are full, and then they'll drop off. Now, what's really cool about leeches is that they've been able to be used in the medical field to help restore circulation to areas of the body, because leeches have this really cool ability to keep your blood from clotting. So when they bite you, they have these kind of blades in their teeth that leave a classic shape like this, where they kind of slice into your skin, and they immediately release an anesthetic to reduce the pain that it causes so you don't actually feel it, followed by an anticoagulant, and that's what's going to be used to keep your blood from clotting. And this is really beneficial for them because if you don't feel it, you're not going to knock them off, and if your blood doesn't clot, then it's going to be able to pull a lot more blood through that opening. And so if you've ever had a leech on you, or if you ever get a leech on you, you might find that when you pull it off, it just bleeds and bleeds and bleeds. That's because of that anticoagulant, that inability to clot blood. Now, it will eventually, once that kind of gets flushed out of there. But the reason that they're used in the medical field is because that anticoagulant will keep blood moving through tissue that's potentially been damaged. So when people have like limb reattachments, if they notice that the blood flow is not being reestablished to the fingers or limbs or whatever was cut off or fell off originally, they'll sometimes put leeches on there to try to pull blood back into those limbs that are struggling to regain their circulation. So they're really, really fascinating, and I think they are misunderstood sometimes. But that is all of our notes for the annelids.